What happens when a 72-year-old man mentions a strange itch and his family calls him dramatic? A simple complaint spirals into something they never saw coming. What happened next left everyone speechless, especially his own son. You'd think that after 72 years of holding yourself together, paying your taxes, serving your country, loving your family, you'd at least earn a little dignity. Maybe a quiet morning with a decent cup of coffee, or a warm good morning from someone in your own house. But I guess that's not how the world works anymore. Not when you're an old man with an itch he can't scratch, and a family that treats you like a leaky faucet. Annoying, inconvenient, and long overdue for replacement. My name's Harold. I'm 72. And a few months ago, I started itching. Not metaphorically, though God knows that too, but physically. A weird, crawling sensation between my shoulder blades, like someone taped a feather there and told it to misbehave. Then it moved, under my left rib, then the side of my neck. Always the same 3 places. Always around the same time. Early morning, just after I'd woken up, and just before the house remembered I existed. I live with my son and his wife. Correction. I survive in their house, like a ghost who forgot to die properly. When my wife passed, peacefully, thank God, Tom insisted I move in. "It'll be good to have you here, Dad," he said. "You won't be alone." What he meant was, you won't be seen. So I made myself useful. I cook breakfast. I feed their mean little dog, even though it growls at me like I stole its mortgage. I even started folding laundry when no one asked. You'd think those tiny things might earn me a sliver of appreciation. Instead, I got comments. "Dad, please don't put the dishes away. You always mess up the order." "Harold, you left the salt out again. Kim hates that." "Oh, you went outside in those pants? Someone could have seen you." "Yeah. Heaven forbid someone spots the elderly in cargo shorts. Alert the neighborhood watch." But I kept quiet. I always kept quiet. That's what men of my generation were taught. Don't complain. Don't explain. Don't burden. But the itch? That wouldn't shut up. And honestly, neither would my brain. It kept whispering, "Something's not right. Something's going on in your body. And you're the only one who cares." One morning, same song, different verse, I made breakfast. Bacon, extra crisp, for Kim. Not that she ever said thanks. Eggs, toast, cut fruit. I placed their mugs exactly the way they liked them. I even set the butter knife on the left, because, apparently, cross-hand reaching is a visual stressor, according to Kim's TikTok guru. And when they finally emerged, her first, then him, it took them exactly 3 seconds to start finding fault. "You used the flowery mug again," Kim said, staring at me like I'd keyed her car. "That's Mom's," Tom added. "We told you to pack those away." I swallowed hard. I thought maybe she'd like to be part of breakfast. Still. Kim scoffed. "What is this? Ghost brunch?" Tom chuckled at that. And just like that, my dead wife's memory became their punchline. Later that day, I went to the free health seminar at the local library. Saw a flyer on the bus stop. "Hidden symptoms seniors should never ignore." Sounded about right. There weren't many of us in the room. Just a few folks trying to make eye contact without looking too lonely. The speaker was Dr. Kelly Morton, a woman half my age and twice as composed. No white coat, just jeans, sneakers, and the kind of voice that makes you sit up straighter. She talked about inflammation, about silent indicators. Then she said something that froze me cold. If you're experiencing itching in the same few areas, shoulders, ribs, neck, it could be your body trying to tell you something. Liver, Gallbladder, pancreas, they don't always scream. Sometimes they whisper. I raised my hand like a schoolboy. She smiled. Yes, sir? I've had that itch. All three places. Weeks now. She nodded, not alarmed, not patronizing. You should get it checked. I can refer you for a basic scan and blood work. It's quick, no cost. I nearly cried right there. Not because of the diagnosis, I didn't even have one, but because she treated me like a human being. A rarity these days. When I got home, still clutching the paperwork, I overheard Kim from the hallway. He went to some senior clinic, and now he's playing doctor. What's next? A support group for itchy ghosts? Tom's voice, quieter. Let him have his little project. Keeps him out of our way. I stood there, frozen. One foot on the welcome mat, the other dangling over a canyon I didn't even know existed. How did I become a joke in my own bloodline? I didn't sleep that night. The itch was worse. The basement was cold. Oh, yeah, they moved me there the week before. It's cozier down there, Kim said, and we need the extra space upstairs. Funny. I didn't remember anyone else needing the upstairs when I was paying for their college tuition. 2 days later, I got the tests done. Blood work, ultrasound, the works. They told me to wait for results. A week, maybe more. I didn't tell Tom. I didn't tell Kim. What was the point? That night, Kim cornered me in the kitchen. I found a Google search on the family laptop. Itching and pancreatic warning signs. That you? I didn't answer. She narrowed her eyes. You're being dramatic. You're probably just dry. Buy some lotion. And that's when it hit me. I could be dying. And the only person who cared was a woman I met for 6 minutes at a library. At breakfast the next morning, I didn't set the table, didn't cook, didn't pour their coffee. Kim came in, saw the empty counter, and looked at me like I'd committed a felony. What's going on? I stared her down. Calm, clear, dry as toast. I guess I'm just itchy. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how this unfolds, because trust me, it only gets worse before it gets better. You'd think there'd be some reward for staying silent, for swallowing every insult like it's a vitamin you didn't ask for, but were told would help, for living in a house where people speak around you, not to you. But no, apparently, the only reward for being the quiet, good old man is that people start acting like you're furniture with a pulse. After I stopped making breakfast, no one said anything. No one asked if I was sick. No one noticed the way I walked slower down the stairs, or the fact that I started using the basement bathroom more because I was too dizzy to climb back up. They just moved on, as if I'd been a seasonal decoration and the season had passed. But I noticed things. I noticed how Tom spent more time in the garage, on the phone, pacing like a man in debt. I noticed how Kim would check the mail before I could, always sliding a few letters into her purse before going back inside. And I noticed how that itch, between the shoulder blades, under the rib, and now traveling down into my lower back, started to come with a burning. Not pain exactly, more like my body was trying to light a flare that nobody else could see. One morning, I woke up to a knock on my basement door. Not the bedroom door upstairs. No. The basement door. Like I was some creepy tenant they regretted ever letting in. It was Kim, holding a flyer. This came in the mail, she said, barely looking at me. You signed up for some clinical appointment? What is this? My hand twitched. I remembered signing up through Dr. Kelly's office for a follow-up, but I hadn't expected them to mail anything here. My mistake. They want to run more tests, I said. The last results weren't clear. Kim crossed her arms. You know how this looks, right? You running around to free clinics like some hypochondriac? People talk. I raised an eyebrow. People talk about old men who mind their health? Must be a slow news day. She didn't laugh, not even a twitch. I'm just saying, she snapped. Maybe if you put this much effort into being useful around the house, we wouldn't have to. She stopped herself. But I knew what came next. Wouldn't have to consider putting me somewhere else. The sentence hung in the air like the smell of burnt toast. Later that week, I decided to visit Dr. Kelly's office in person. It wasn't easy. The bus was packed, and every jolt felt like it dislodged something inside me. I sat by the window and watched a boy offer his seat to a pregnant woman. It made me smile, briefly. Someone out there still had manners. At the clinic, they took more blood. Then they sent me into a room with a nurse who asked too many questions. Any appetite loss? Yes. Fatigue? Constant. Family support? I laughed. A dry, bitter kind of laugh that felt older than me. I live with my son and daughter-in-law, I said. They support each other in pretending I'm invisible. She didn't even blink, just typed it in like I was ordering a sandwich. When I got home, the basement door was locked. I thought I was losing my mind. Tried the handle again. Nothing. I knocked. No answer. Finally, Tom opened it. His eyes were red. He wasn't angry. He was exhausted. Where were you? I had an appointment. You didn't tell anyone. Didn't know I needed permission. He ran a hand over his face. You're not well, Dad. This wandering off, these appointments, maybe we should start thinking about alternatives. My blood ran cold. What kind of alternatives? He hesitated. Assisted care, or something part-time. Just until things stabilize. I stared at him. The boy I taught to ride a bike. The same kid who once cried when I missed his baseball game. And now he was talking about parking me in a facility like I was a car with no brakes. I'm still your father, I said. He didn't argue. That somehow made it worse. The next morning, I found something taped to the fridge. A printed schedule of basement use hours. Apparently, my existence now had a time slot. 7 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. Bathroom shower, 12 p.m. to 12:30 p.m. Kitchen access, no stove use. 8 p.m. Lights out. I stared at the list like it was an obituary someone forgot to submit. So, I did the only thing a man in my position could do. I tore it down, walked upstairs, and made a pot of coffee. Loudly, Kim walked in. What are you doing? Making coffee, I said. Didn't see brewing on the forbidden list. She looked stunned, but not angry, just confused. Like a statue, it suddenly started moving. That day, I went through my old boxes in the basement. Photos, letters, service medals, the wedding band I stopped wearing after Helen passed, and something else, my old tape recorder, still worked. I hit record and started talking. About the itch, about the clinic, about the things I heard through the vents, about the schedule on the fridge, and the way my family treated me like a cracked vase they were too polite to throw out. I didn't know who I was recording it for. Maybe myself. Maybe for Tom one day, when he's old and realizes what it means to be forgotten in plain sight. That night, I had another episode. Sharp pain under the rib, dizziness, cold sweat. I crawled up the basement steps. No one heard me. I stood in the hallway for what felt like an hour before Tom finally came out of his room. What's wrong? I need to go to the hospital. He looked annoyed. Annoyed? Now? It's midnight. I stared at him. Yes, now, he sighed, long and loud. Let me get my keys. The ride was silent. At the ER, the nurse took me in immediately. They ran more tests, this time with urgency. I caught a glimpse of the screen when the doctor left the room. Couldn't make sense of it, but I knew that look. The look doctors wear when the news is bad, but they haven't decided how to say it yet. Tom waited outside, scrolling his phone. When the doctor came back, she closed the door behind her. "Mr. Stewart, I'm going to be honest with you. Finally, someone. This is it. The turning point. Everything you've been waiting for. It's right here, in the next chapter. Don't miss how this story flips on its head, and how I finally decide enough is enough." The ER room was too bright. You ever notice how hospitals love that soft, fake light that never turns off, no matter the hour? It doesn't matter if you're walking in for a paper cut or a death sentence. It all looks the same. The doctor stood at the foot of the bed like she was preparing to deliver the weather forecast. Only this one didn't involve sunshine. "Mr. Stewart," she began, "we're seeing signs of something concerning in your liver and pancreas. Based on the markers in your blood, this might be more than inflammation. We'll need to run more detailed scans. Tomorrow. Immediately." I didn't say a word. Not because I didn't have questions. Oh, I had them. An entire parade of panicked, sarcastic, frightened questions. Like, am I dying? Or just pre-dying? Or, will my son even drive me back here? Or will he need to ask his wife for permission first? But I stayed quiet. Because when you've spent months being treated like background noise, the silence starts to feel like armor. She offered a soft smile, handed me a clipboard, and said we'd discuss options after the scans. "Bring someone with you tomorrow if you can," she added. "It's good to have support." Right. Support. Tom picked me up from the hospital like I was a borrowed lawnmower he forgot he'd lent out. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't even stop scrolling through his phone until we hit a red light. "You okay?" he mumbled. "I might be dying." He glanced at me, blinked, then shrugged. "Well, let's see what the tests say." I turned toward the window and stared into the darkness. Not because I didn't want to scream, but because I knew it wouldn't make a damn bit of difference. My son didn't see me anymore. He saw an obligation with a recliner. That night, I couldn't sleep. Partly because my body ached like it had a secret to confess, but mostly because something in me had shifted. Not broken, shifted. Like an old tree that finally decides, after 40 years of being struck by lightning, that it's done pretending to be quiet. I pulled out my recorder, pressed play. My own voice filled the room. They made a schedule. For me. Like I'm a janitor who needs permission to piss. Click. Said I was being dramatic. Told me the itch was in my head. It was never in my head. Click. I buried my wife. Alone. Didn't ask them for anything. And when I moved in, I didn't want to be a burden. I just wanted a place to matter. Click. I sat there, breathing like I'd run a marathon. Then I pressed record. Tomorrow, I find out if I'm dying. I'm not afraid of that. I'm afraid of dying in a basement where no one would notice for 3 days. The next morning, Tom drove me to the hospital. Kim didn't even come. I asked him to wait during the scan. He said he had a conference call and parked himself in the lobby, probably watching videos about stocks or whatever middle-aged disappointment looks like. The CT scan was quiet, cold, mechanical. I lay there thinking about how I'd lived most of my life solving other people's problems, fixing cars, giving advice, holding hands at funerals. Now, I was a data point on a screen. After the scan, the doctor came back. Serious again, clipboard in hand. "We're still reviewing, but it looks like early-stage pancreatic inflammation. Possibly a cyst pressing on nearby nerves. Could explain the itching." She explained more about follow-ups, specialists, lifestyle adjustments, but I stopped listening. Not out of disrespect, just exhaustion. So I nodded, took the papers, and walked out without a word. Tom looked up as I approached. That was fast. What did they say? They said I've got some time left, I said. Time to stop pretending I don't notice what's going on. He blinked. I didn't wait for a reply. I just walked out the front door, called a cab, and went back to the house alone. Back home, I opened the basement door and looked around like I was seeing it for the first time. It was colder than usual. Kim had unplugged the space heater. Of course. So I did what any 72-year-old man with a newfound diagnosis and a truckload of resentment would do. I packed a bag. Just essentials. Medication. Toiletries. A few letters from Helen I kept in a shoebox. My recorder. Then I walked upstairs. Sat in the living room. Waited. Kim walked in first. "What are you doing here?" "Living," I said. "In a house I partially paid for, remember?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't get dramatic." I laughed. "You've said that before. Usually when I talk about needing medical help or emotional respect." Tom came in next. "Dad, can we not do this now?" "No," I said. "We're doing this exactly now." I stood up. Not fast, not strong, but steady. "You both have made it clear how inconvenient I am, how my presence is something to tolerate, not embrace. So here's what's going to happen." They stared at me. For once, silent. "I'm not going anywhere. Not until I choose to. Not because you printed some schedule and taped it to a fridge. Not because you're embarrassed of what aging looks like. I'm staying. But the next time either of you speaks to me like I'm disposable, I'll be gone. And you'll never get a second chance to do the right thing." Tom swallowed. Kim's arms were crossed, but her eyes blinked faster than usual. Nervous. Defensive. I walked past them, up to the second floor, to the empty guest room, closed the door, and I slept. Not in a cold basement, not surrounded by cardboard, but in a real bed, like a person. When I woke up, I expected the backlash. Instead, there was silence. No one said a word all day, no complaints, no sarcastic digs, no sudden policy changes. Just silence. It was a start. That evening, I sat on the porch, brought my recorder with me, pressed record. Day 1. I'm not dead, but something old in me is, the part that kept waiting for respect instead of demanding it. I leaned back, closed my eyes, let the wind itch my neck, just a little. Everything is now in motion, but nothing's over yet. In the final chapter, I face the truth behind everything they hid, and I make my choice. Don't miss how this ends. The funny thing about silence is that it's only comforting when you've earned it. Real silence, earned silence, is peace. The other kind, the kind I had in that house for months, that was just people waiting for you to give up. But I didn't. That morning, I woke up in the upstairs guest room again. Sunlight came through the window. I could hear the faint clink of Kim's spoon in her coffee cup downstairs. Tom was probably scrolling through the same news apps, looking for stock tips he never acted on. I sat up and waited, just to see. Would someone come knock? Would they ask how I slept? Would they say anything at all? Number. And you know what? That told me everything. I didn't tell them about the voicemail I'd received the night before. Dr. Kelly had called, sounding firm but kind. "We'd like to monitor your condition more closely. There are some irregularities in your scan that need follow-up, but we caught them early. That's the good news." Early. That word stuck with me. Not just in terms of my health, in terms of everything. They tried to box me into a basement. Emotionally, physically, they tried to make me feel like the end had already arrived. But they were wrong. I was still early. I decided to go out, not to escape, not to make a point, just to breathe air that hadn't been filtered through obligation and resentment. There's a diner 4 blocks down from the house. I used to go there with Helen on Saturdays. It hasn't changed. Same sticky menus. Same booth by the window. Same old radio playing music from a decade no one wants to admit they loved. I ordered coffee and toast. The waitress, maybe 30, tattoo on her wrist, eyes like she's seen a lot more than her age should allow, asked, "You okay, mister?" And I looked at her. I mean, really looked. "I'm getting there," I said. She nodded like she understood. Back home, I found the living room empty. Tom was in the garage, tinkering with a project he'd never finish. Kim was upstairs, probably organizing her closet again. So I sat down with my recorder and opened my laptop, and I began uploading. The recordings, the monologues, the clips I'd taken of the basement rules taped to the fridge, the quiet moments where I documented everything, how I was treated, how I felt, what this so-called family had slowly stolen from me. Not money, not even space, but dignity. I created a profile on a site for caregivers and elder justice advocates, posted the first file under the title, Voices from the Basement, An Old Man's Truth. Within 12 hours, it had 400 plays. Then 1,200. Comments poured in. "This broke my heart. You deserve better." Reminds me of my dad. "Thank you for sharing this." I'm crying in my office. My grandma went through the same thing. Someone even wrote, "You're not alone. We hear you." For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a relic or a problem. I felt real. Later that week, Tom asked if we could talk. He looked nervous, like he was about to meet a lawyer. And in some ways, maybe he was. "I listened to some of those recordings," he said, standing in the hallway like a man outside a locked door. "Oh?" I answered, calm. I didn't realize it had gotten so bad. I nodded. "You didn't want to realize." He looked away. "Kim said maybe we should have been more careful." "Careful?" I laughed. "You were very careful, Tom. Careful not to care. Careful not to ask questions. Careful enough to let me rot in a basement while you played house upstairs." He said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. So I gave him a choice. "You want to do better?" I asked. "Fine, then do it. Not with words, with action. You think I need apologies? I need a seat at the table. I need to matter again." Things didn't change overnight. They never do. But change started. That Sunday I cooked breakfast, for myself. I didn't wait to be invited. I didn't ask if they were hungry. I cooked. I sat at the table. I ate. Tom joined me. He brought his own plate. No words, just presence. The next week, Kim asked if I needed a ride to my follow-up appointment. I said no. I'd already called a friend from the library group, someone who listened. Eventually, I started getting invited to speak, at small senior centers, on podcasts, even one radio show. "Tell your story," they said. So I did. Not because I needed pity, because I needed the truth to have a voice. A month later, Tom sat with me on the porch. "You're different," he said. "No," I corrected. "I'm back." He nodded slowly. "I think I forgot who you were." "You didn't forget," I said. "You just stopped looking." The itching hasn't gone away completely, but now I have the words for it. Now I know what it means when your body tells you something's wrong. And I don't ignore it anymore. Not in my skin, not in my soul, not in my house. We don't disappear just because we're older. We don't lose value because we walk slower or speak less. They might try to turn us into furniture, silent, still, tucked away. But some of us remember the fire, and if you're lucky, you live long enough to light it again.